International Civil Society Center. We're based in Berlin. We are one of the many members of the collaborative, one of the many excited members about what we're doing together. If you can see either on screen or here in the room, there's quite a number of organizations, both from government, from civil society, multilaterals and academia, who have come together to form this exciting coalition. The focus of today will be on youth. Actually, not because youth is a marginal group, quite the opposite. In quite a number of countries, youth is now the majority of people. But of course, it's a group that is very often overlooked or not considered appropriately in policymaking processes. We have several reps of the collaborative with us. We will get to everyone as they speak. We are particularly grateful to UN Women, who's hosting us here. Thanks a lot, which I think should also prompt us to talk a little bit about the gender dimension of marginalization, which is one of the key issues we need to address. As I said, the event will be live streamed. We have sign language translation. Very grateful to the Danish Institute for Human Rights for supporting this sign language translation financially. Now, without further ado, let us now hear from Stefan Schweinfest, who is Director of UN Statistics Division, and also the co-chair of the collaborative, for some opening remarks and kick us off into this exciting event. Stefan.
Thank you very much, Wolfgang, and thanks for the Stefan Schweinfest. Usually people stumble over my last name. I'm usually universally known as Stefan. The rest we forget. I'm the director of the UN Statistics Division, and I was invited here at this meeting, and because we are, of course, my staff, my team is organizing it, and when I saw youth and communities, I said, of course, I want to be part of that meeting here. So welcome everybody. I mean, as one of the co-chairs of the collaborative on citizen data together with UN Data, there's a bit of a deja vu. I was here yesterday on an event on gender statistics, and I guess we will see each other with UN Women tomorrow on the launch of our SDGs gender snapshot. So people will be talking about us being together all the time, Jessa. We have to be careful. I mean, this is an exciting event, and I was really happy to be here because citizen data is critically important, of course. It has the power to transform everything. I mean, our data are ultimately from citizens and for citizens. And I think by leveraging the power of citizen data, we can create more transparent, inclusive, and effective policies. And I think what is really beautiful, it's not only the information that citizen data brings to the table. I think it's the energy that we are all bringing to the table because it's involving citizens really in the construction of information systems that we all need to take decisions at all levels. And I think it's particularly important because it gives an access road also for those that are far too often overlooked, vulnerable groups. So if we come together here, we can really bring everybody together. And I mean, today is also officially the Action Day for Youth. So there are many events, and we want to bring young people and the data enthusiasm to the table because this is, as the name indicates, a collaborative. We need everybody. We need the official guys like me, national statistical offices, but we also need civil society, academia, development partners, and so to work on all of this together. So we have, as many of you may know, and those who do not know, they will learn about it today, our Copenhagen framework for citizen data that guides the engagement of citizens in data and lays down some principles of how we work together. We statisticians are in that sense a little bit boring. We like our statistic principles and norms, but I always say norms are not a straitjacket, but they are a language that allows us to speak across sectors and the universe and countries. If we agree on certain principles and standards, then we can actually connect better and talk all across the world. And that is what the United Nations Statistical Commission is all about, where the chief statisticians come together. Of course, they are traditionally working more on official statistics, but I've seen the Statistical Commission transform. We have a program on big data. We are now connecting to geospatial information. We are connecting to citizen-generated data, because we all understand that to satisfy the data hunger that the decision makers have nowadays, we need a much broader spectrum of information, and we need to bring all of this together. So I think I'm very excited about this Copenhagen framework. And we are certainly very much committed to working on it and implementing it together with our partners, ICSC. Wolfgang, thank you very much for being here. Our official partners, Monica and Hemraj from Nepal, we will hear a little bit about it in just a minute, and everybody else here in the room. So thanks for coming together, and I wish you an exciting event.
Thank you, Stefan. And I know you were basically just asked to open us up, but if you allow, there will be one question, personal one from me. We're here to not just at the UN Summit of the Future, but also to witness a global pact that will be hopefully approved during the next week or so. Do you think our issue is adequately addressed at the document and at the summit?
Of course, the answer is no. Let's be honest. But I mean, that I take that always as a positive thing, because it's a challenge for us. I mean, the issue of data and information in general is never adequately addressed. I mean, we statisticians are also not necessarily always glamoring for the limelight. We are perhaps sometimes even better if we work a little bit quietly in the background, because we have to, I always say, we have to build the underlying information infrastructure. But I think we have become better talking about it and sensitizing people, and we need to keep doing this. Next year, for instance, we have another big UN event, which is the Financing for Development Conference. And that is a real thing, because they will be talking about money. And when people talk about money, everybody should start paying attention. So we have already started a program of trying to make sure that also sustainable development, financing for sustainable development, needs to have a dimension of financing for sustainable data. And I'm very much believing in sustainable data, because we are talking about development. We don't just want to have quick data and feeling somebody's pulse and taking a snapshot. I always say we are not taking pictures, we are making a movie. We want to observe things over time. If a situation is bad right now, we don't only just want to document it, we want to measure it in 6 months and 2 years and see that really something has changed. That's the real story we want to tell. So sustainable data is important, and investment in sustainable data is important. But that means we also don't just have to do a good job, we also have to talk about our job, and we have to become a little bit more a better marketing people for our own cause. And that's what we are doing here. And we need partners like you to help us to draw attention to this.
Thank you very much. We take this as encouragement, as collective encouragement, because I think we believe in that cause, and there's progress to be made. Which leads me now to the next session of the panel. I lost a little bit the PowerPoint presentation that was up a minute ago, but the next part of the discussion will be basically an input from two representatives of two governments, the National Statistical Offices or Institutes respective of the national environment we're in. So we will hear, first of all, from Monica Pratesi, Director of Department for Statistical Production at the Italian National Institute of Statistics. INIS, okay. And then from Dr. Raj, the Deputy Chief Statistician at the NSO in Nepal, which definitely will give us fabulous perspectives from two different places in the world. So why don't we start with Monica? Why is this so important, and where and how can we make progress?
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you what we have done and what we are doing in the ISTAT, Italian National Statistical Institute, on citizen data. And I would like to start with a story, telling a story that's about children. So and that's about the complex relation between children and official statistics in Italy, at least. So originally, the children were perceived as an age group, okay? An age class for statistics. And we had no specific attention to them as a social subject. But then, obviously, unfortunately, official statistics started to pay attention to children, and where relevant indicators were disseminated about school attendance, just to make an example. And also specific questions were introduced in questionnaires for families. Then in 2015, a new survey was introduced. And this new survey was introduced on the integration of second generation, that is migrants, to be clear. And in this case, children were an active part. Then in 2023, we carried out another survey, and that is the new survey, and the title is Children and Young People, Behaviors, Attitudes, and Future Plans. And in this case, specific methods and instruments to collect data were studied. And we collected data directly from the young age group. The perspective was reversed completely. And young people are cooperating now directly into shaping the survey. And this is a completely different approach from an age class to an active cooperation. It was a sort of silent revolution, if we want. These young citizens evolved from an age group, a target, a silent target, to cooperators in the data value chain from the beginning, the data need, and then to the final steps, that is dissemination of the whole statistical process. So this is a story just to say that we are doing this transformation, this evolution, if you want, making passive respondents active cooperators. And this obviously is done following priorities, but I don't know if you want to say, may I say something on priorities? Oh, okay. So first of all, the targets, I would say the thematic priorities. Children have just said, and we are interested also in other aspects, not only school attendance, but also educational poverty. That is another thing. This more complex concept involving also other aspects of children lives. Then obviously, I say obviously because it is a tradition for ISTAT, gender-based statistics, and LGBTQ plus population, this in cooperation with the National Anti-Discrimination Office. Obviously, if you want to follow the motto, no one left behind, we need to open statistics to hard-to-reach populations. And homeless, just to make an example, is a part of this hard-to-reach population. But organizing a survey on homeless is not enough. And in Italy, we are organizing a survey on homeless, but at the same time, we are also organizing a census of services dedicated to the homeless population, and a survey on the characteristic of these centers. And this is important because we need to know more on civil society organizations and on the possibility they have in being a partner in producing data. Gender-based violence, in 2025, we are going on the field with the new wave, after 10 years, but with another wave of the survey on gender-based violence. And in this case, as we have done in the past, anti-violence center operators will be included in the interviewers' teams. So not only traditional and professional interviewers, but also operators that have an experience of talking with women, talking with people. They will be inserted in our interviewers team. So, and this is another way of including civil society organizations in our data collection flow. Next step would be also to understand sustainable behaviors of enterprises and corporate sustainability. And this is a challenge, we know, but we think that law is changing in Europe and going towards the P, the prosperity P, in a way that encompasses economic growth, but do not compromise social and environmental sustainability. This is a very important topic. So from the topic point of view, we have priorities, but we have also priorities in methodology, because involving civil society organizations and changing data collection modes requires for new methods to understand more on quality, on the quality framework of these very often non-probability samples, and also quality framework of integrated data, because we need to integrate database, and this is not easy. We know that we are not in a perfect world, and we hope that following the principles, the fundamental principles of official statistics, particularly guaranteeing the confidentiality of data, because this is important, we can move forward and make progress on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. And before we hear from your colleague from Nepal, maybe a question also from me. What took us so long, and what are the obstacles we're trying to overcome from your perspective? Yes, Monica.
Okay, so first of all, we need to have an action of advocacy, I will say, from the collaborative. Because imagine, I had a note here on disaster-related data. Imagine how much we can do together on disaster-related data if we involve citizens on climate change, extreme events, life in the cities. Obviously, this means that we need also to move forward the citizen science methodologies, but we need an advocacy action to convince governments that time are mature to go towards this kind of novelties. And then I think that we need to have a promotion of international and national workshops on citizen data, because we need agoras where we share experiences from one part of the world to the other. And also we need a sort of education to cooperation with civil society organizations, because sometimes, at least in Italy, we have the idea that they consider national statistical institutes or agencies like a sort of one-stop shop where to have microdata, and then that's fine. please, thank you for microdata, but as civil society organizations, we have something more, something different to do. So goodbye, and thanks for the microdata. And this is not the useful perspective. So we need advocacy actions for cooperations and promotion on data, on disaster-related data, according to me. And then there is the big theme, but I do not want to be, I mean, there are many others and ideas and contributions, but we have the artificial intelligence challenge that is important, because we say the motto is nothing about us without us, nothing about us without us, no one to be left behind. And these two mottos should be harmonized in the artificial intelligence world, having attention to algorithm and how we feed them. So,
and that's a huge one, and let's see whether we can get to that, but definitely a very contemporary kind of big challenge right now. Thanks, Monica. We're now coming to a government perspective from Nepal. And mind you, Dr. Raj, while you're representing the NSO of that particular country, you also have a colleague from civil society from Nepal with you on the panel. So we'll get different perspectives. So let's see whether that one works. Here we go. Sorry.
Good morning, everyone. Let me put some perspective. In the Statistics Office of Nepal. We all know that statistics are generated by different means, particularly focusing on the traditional data sources like admin data, survey data, census data, and now we are trying to move towards the non-traditional data sources, like being explained by my colleague from Italy, the artificial intelligence, big data, even a little bit on the citizen-generated data as well. National Statistics Office is mainly producing different set of the data, which are called official data. According to the fundamental principle of official statistics, we follow all those guidelines in collaboration with the government entities, with the ministries, with the departments, with the commissions, and with many others in the form of designated statistics. But we know that the survey and census, even the collection of the designated statistics, is becoming more and more expensive. That's why we have not been able to produce all sort of the data that are required by the data users, which are the varieties in numbers, the governments, local governments, the civil society members, academia. We have not been able to provide them all sort of the data. For example, you can see on the screen that we have prioritized the SDG indicators. We have not been able to monitor all those SDG indicators, and then we prioritized them into number 301. Even we are not able to produce all of them. Less than 50% of the SDGs are monitored regularly by these official statistics produced from the government agencies, line ministries, and many other official statistics. More disaggregated data were required for this SDG and even for the national requirements to monitor the policy and plans at the national level. That's why we assume that, we have not yet done, but we assume that citizen data may be a very good source to fill these data gaps. That's the assumption currently. Regarding the legal provisions, we have the Statistics Act, which was recently revised in 2022. We had a very old Statistics Act, and then that was revised. And then under that revised Statistics Act, it looks a little bit traditional in terms, because all the agencies are not supposed to produce the data at the national level. They can produce according to their theme, they can do any type of the research. But if they are going to do some estimates at the national level, then they have to take permission from the National Statistics Office. These are some of the clauses on the newly revised Statistics Act. That's why we assume that that will apply for those agencies which are going to produce the data in the coming days. That should also apply for these the CSOs, the civil society organizations as well. That's my assumption. The Statistics Act has given, the Statistics Act has that mandate, and statistic regulations has given all those details, how to get engaged, how to make all those citizen-generated data official statistics. To make them official, they need to be collaborated with the Statistics Office at the design of the survey, even a little bit on the implementation of the survey, and a little bit more on those weights. We statistical people know that weights are quite important on estimating the numbers from the sample surveys particularly. To design those weights, these are some of the ideas, and then we are discussing a little bit about this implementation of this Statistics Act. We recently completed the statistics, the strategy for the development of the statistics first version, and then second version is awaited the approval from the government. And then this NSDS has also taken into consideration the major source of the data as the citizen-generated data, because government agencies has not been able to produce all sort of the data that are required by the data users, including national and international agencies. That's why plan is to collaborate with the citizens. And then the future plan is that let's make the statistics production cost effective, because surveys are getting more and more expensive. Let's focus on some cost effective methods. And then one way will be the citizen generated data, though there are many other ways like use of big data, use of geo-referential data, or even the use of artificial intelligence. That may be other options which we have also started. Then we are planning to foster a deeper discussion on citizen data with stakeholders, study on how citizen data can be linked with the national statistical system. That will not confront with the existing Statistics Act and regulations. In a country where the literacy itself is still around 20% of the people are illiterate, we can think about the statistical literacy. Statistical literacy, though we don't have exact survey how many people are statistically literate in my country, but we assume that statistical literacy is a very big issue among the policymakers, among the data users, at least not with the data producers, with the data users. That's why with this situation of the statistical literacy, we can think to increase the statistical literacy as well as the statistical capacity to produce, to analyze, and to use the existing data. Then the support of the organizations, and then study how the citizen data can be included in the NSDS, and then develop the designated statistical action plan. These may be some of the future plans that we can engage in the days to come. These are some of the examples that we have discussed before, that the gender-based violence or the domestic violence, even that persists in the countries like mine. No? Even the disaster data, which can occur anytime, anywhere. We are disaster-prone country, ranked within the 20th in the global ranking that has been published by the UNSD. Then the gender-based violence, disaster-related data, these may be some of the areas where you can start engagement with the civil society, engagement with the citizens. The citizen data are quite new for us, even for me. The citizen-generated data is a very, very new concept compared to the administrative data system, compared to the surveys, censuses, as well as the part of the big data. What we knew from this Copenhagen framework on the citizen-generated data is that now at least we are getting statistically literate on this new concept. Before the citizen-generated data, that was quite limited understanding among the picture of the officially generated data worldwide. Then citizen-generated data were not included in the official statistical framework. Communication with the CSOs in this matter was rarely practiced. But with the emergence of this Copenhagen framework, these situations has been improving. Not really working, but these situations has been improving. And then these are some of the lessons learned. For your kind information, National Statistics Office, in collaboration with many other CSOs, has implemented one national level workshop last year in conjunction with the UNSD team. which are present here, and these are some of the lessons learned. During pandemic, even during the disaster calamities, Nepal is an earthquake-prone country, and then a lot of earthquakes, floods, and then glacier lake outburst floods, they occur very frequently, and even collecting data in those situations is quite critical. The disaster calamities or emergencies, the civil society can work together with the statistics office, or they can help us in generating the data, the official data. The national representative statistics, that's another issue. The data generated at one level may be representative or not. We can discuss further on those issues, that how to make them nationally representative at the national level, and then collaborative with the citizens, and then the citizen related organizations. We have many non-state actors, the non-government organizations called NGOs, maybe 1,000 in numbers working in my country. If we can collaborate at least with some of them, not all, then in the production of the data system, then that will be quite good. These are some of the challenges that we are discussing since last many years, that lack of trust. What we have tried during the pandemic, during the disaster, is that when citizens are supposed to report their own loss and damage, then it's generally exaggerated, because the reliefs are associated with that type of the information. The trust, how to make the data trustworthy, concerns about the quality and the sustainability of this data, and then the capacity of the CSOs themselves in a country like Nepal, where statistical literacy is quite low. These are some of the challenges, but at least we are quite interested to work on this new dimension of the data production. The traditional, I don't know, it's traditional or it's the alternate or it's modern type of the data collection system, but at least it's the new for the official statistics, and we will be quite happy to work with the citizens, to work with the civil society organizations to produce the official statistics from another alternative data source, that is citizen generated data. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Hem. I found it actually quite remarkable that both of you came up with very similar kind of thematic areas. The questions over disaster, data on disaster response, and then gender-based violence. Of course, the challenges look different. I was wondering actually how you're dealing with the question of trust between state and non-state actors. I'm sure it is to a certain extent a question also in Italy or similar countries, but maybe we allow for one or two questions from the audience to the two colleagues who reported from the government side before we go into the panel. Anything urgent? Any direct question right now? Please.
Thank you, Sheda Bedi from Open Data Watch, and thanks for great discussions. My question is that I wanted to hear from both Nepal and Italy a little more on how do we make sure that this data actually makes it to the policymakers and making a difference, and whose responsibility is it to monitor that? Is it civil society organizations, NSOs, a combination of the two? And if we don't watch that in the data value cycle, what do we lose? Thank you.
Great question. One more, maybe? That's okay. We'll get to some more interaction after the panel, but maybe the two colleagues could answer the question of how to get this into the government processes.
For your remarks, for your questions, yes, the use of this data, that's quite important. No, once we produce the data, then this should have to be used by someone, by the data users, at least by the policymakers, by the academia, or by the civil society themselves, or by the National Statistics Office. That's why during my presentation also, the Statistics Act has kept that mandate, though it looks a little bit traditional, that to take some permission. It's not exactly the licensing system. It's like working together, the modality and working together. If those citizen-generated data, they work together with the statistics office or any other designated statistical agencies, and then they are produced, then the advocacy will come from both ways, from the civil society organizations, from that collaborating agency, either NSO or Ministry of Agriculture or Ministry of Home Affairs, dealing with the disaster-related data or whatever may be. That's why my opinion is that let's make it as a joint initiative that both will report to the policymakers. Let's do the joint dissemination workshops. So that data users will be aware that yes, these data came from the combined way with the government and non-government actors, and then they are quite useful, they are reliable, they are trustworthy, and they are worth to use. In my opinion, it should go like two way, not either by government or with CSO only. Thank you.
Monica.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. That's a big one because data, data are everywhere, but there are different actors producing data. Data means given, data is made by an actor. So this actor can produce or not official statistics. And when I say official statistics, I say something with a label that guarantee quality, guarantee procedures, guarantee respect of privacy, and so on. At least in democracies or in European states is like that. We have an European statistical system with a set of rules, a code of practice, stating principles like the 10 fundamental principles of the United Nations, saying that if we were in a perfect world, let me say like this, things are the result of a cooperation between public bodies and official statistics and official statistical institute and civil society organizations and so on. But nowadays we live in a digital world. We have plenty of privately held data, and we have plenty of civil society organizations able to produce data according to quality principles. So if we want to put all these efforts together, according to my view, we can, and we can do a joint action for governments to say that, as in the past, we had the involvement of civil society organizations in understanding the data information needs and in helping for disseminations. Nowadays, we must have a deeper involvement because society is transformed, data collection tools are transformed, and also quality principles are different. So according to me, this is my personal view as professor of statistics of the University of Pisa, if I can say this. We are going towards a democratization of the process in the sense that the cooperation of citizens with official bodies of data production will give us the possibility of having an improved participation, a sort of activism, okay, of citizens in order to understand how data are produced, because data is given, means given. And if we want to participate actively, we need to understand how this data is given by official statistics, yes, but also by other organizations and enterprises. So my point is that we can do it, and we can do it together, not one against the other, because that's the way to do, according to me.
Thank you both. We're now coming to some other perspectives. We will hear both from activists, representatives of the so-called marginalized groups, however you want to describe yourselves, but let's hear from Silke Birkenborg-Andersen and from Sylvain Obedi. Silke, you're the Danish youth representative on policy and partnerships, if I get that right. Democracy. And Sylvain, you're representing an organization called Enable the Disabled. You're coming from Congo, from Goma just now. So thanks for making the long way to join us in this panel. Let's hear from you why this is important, the inclusion of citizen-generated data, particularly from the stakeholder groups that you are representing, and what needs to happen to improve these processes, also after hearing the pleas for collaboration from the two colleagues from governments. Silke, why don't you start us off?
Yes, thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me to this amazing side event. So I'm a Danish youth delegate to the UN. So I represent all of the Danish youth and all of the opinions of young people in Denmark. And today I'm going to talk about why youth are important also in data. Youth are the future, but not only the future. We are 16% of the world's population. By 2030, youth is expected to grow by 7%, and almost 80% of youth live in the global south. That's a lot of people. And the decision that are being made or being taken in the UN or any other decision-making body have a great amount of impact on so many people. And they deserve to be heard and to influence and decide on their own future and what their future is going to look like. And youth are incredibly engaged. The report shows that youth are more interested in decision-making than ever before. But we often lack the support to get access to platforms like the UN. And we are often underrepresented in official data, resulting in policies not reflecting youth's needs. And there's a great amount of potential from 1.8 billion young people. We have creativity and a sense of future-oriented focus. We have so many innovations, ideas, and approach to policies. Reports also shows that when youth are involved in peace-making processes or decision-making, the chance of it being more successful is higher. Involving youth empowers to take ownerships of these decisions and issues, and that foster a greater civic engagement. And as you were talking about trust, one of the things that would help with trust in government or trust in each other is involving youth. Data on what youth's needs are limited. Not only does it make us not heard of our ideas, and it also matters in terms of a policy, because policymakers might have a potential of inaccurately views of the situations of youth, and yeah, that leads to address issues that might not be there or are different. And if we're serious about building a better future, such as what we are talking about at Summit of the Future, and creating solution for sustainable development, we must put light on youth. And involvement of youth ensures policies are sustainable, effective. So yeah, that's at least what I want to say now.
Thank you, Silke, for this strong statement on inclusion and participation of youth, which definitely has to improve. And this is the place and this is the time. You're completely right. Let's hear from Sylvain about your perspective. You're bringing a different stakeholder group in, but you might have a broader view as well. Sylvain.
Thank you so much, and thank you, colleague, for the good intervention. Most of my intervention is coming in there. Why is important to involve marginalized group and in particular in decision-making space? The first thing we have to understand is because as youth, we understand very well our communities and experiences better than everyone will see, and can assure that our members are counted, included, and ensure that matters to us are included from the state. We also have a better understanding of where to reach out our members in case of an emergency. We often new perspective and innovative solutions rooted in our living experience, which is reflect the unique challenge of our communities. The inclusion, forced employment, and a sense of belonging, encouraging active participation and advocacy, leading more equitable outcomes. In addition, the engagement of young people with disability scream democracy and social cohesion by forcing a culture of belonging and respect, plus thus bringing social division. Ultimately, the participation of young people and marginalized people is not just about representation, but it's essential to step toward building a more just and inclusive future for all, as this action can lead to really policy change and impact people's lives. The participation of young people from marginalized group is not about representation, but it's essential. Yeah, my country, Democratic Republic of Congo, for almost 3 years has been in various serious massive displacement of population, approximately 2.4 million people. This is according to the statistic published by OCHA in August this year, but it's difficult to determine exactly how many of this population has a disability. Furthermore, it is not possible to respond inclusively and accessible to all, and to address this gap of lack of disaggregated data on disability. Through my organization, ADA, we had screened OPD's capacity and managing a network of 9 OPDs that are currently working with us on advocacy for collection of data on persons with disability.
Thank you, Sylvain. And thanks for reminding us, and you did that twice very strongly, that this is not just about representation. Representation is not good enough. Making voices heard is the next step, but making voices count is the one that really matters. So having other stakeholder groups being actively involved in decision-making progress, that's the ultimate aim we need to get to. So thanks for reminding us, and let's continue with both Sylvain, you, and with Jay Lal, who is the country director of VSO Nepal, Volunteer Service Overseas, to hear a little bit more practically, what does it mean? You have the community perspective. What does it mean when you have communities actively involved in data use? Maybe we start with Jay.
Okay, thank you very much, Walter. And hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to you all. My name is Jay Lal, and I'm from VSO. VSO is a non-profit organization established in 1958. Currently, we are in 23 countries. VSO is also a member of Leave No One Behind Consortium, led by ICSC. today I'm going to reflect on, share some experiences on data use in Nepal. So before I talk about, reflect and share my experiences working in Nepal on data use, let me share a few facts and figures from Nepal so that you can better contextualize in which context we are operating this. So for those who don't know Nepal, Nepal lies in South Asia. It stands at 146th position at HDI. And there is a huge high prevalence of disparity and discrimination based on gender, caste, ethnicity, class, and disability in Nepal. Male literacy rate is 84%, whereas female literacy rate is 69%. 75% of young men and only 64% of young women are economically active in Nepal. The demographic composition of the country is not reflected in the parliament, federal parliament, with representation of only 8% of Dalit against their 13.4% percentage of population, and 33% of women against 51% of their population in the country. So this is the situation in political representation in the federal parliament of Nepal. And what we also have information that with the current pace of implementation and development, Nepal is projected to meet only 60% of the Sustainable Development Goals indicator set for 2030. And in this context, what we see that at present time, Nepal's youth population currently is at 40.3%. Which is the highest proportion ever recorded, highlighting the growing significance of young people. So this is the context from Nepal. So in this context, we are operating, and VSO and LNOB consortium members, represented by 11 organizations, civil society organizations in Nepal, are promoting and using citizen-generated data, which we all know is a very powerful tool to empower marginalized communities, give their voice and representation. So this is the context. So what we are doing in our actions. So as Wolfgang said, that making voices and heard, this is very, very important. So in VSO, what we are doing that we have trained 29 young volunteers on citizen-generated data, and they are continuously engaged in data collections. These 29 young volunteers are continuously engaged in data collections. VSO has also trained 134 individuals, including 22 CSO representatives on CGD processes, and over 891 people have been trained in citizen-led monitoring. So that is another information we have. VSO has conducted community dialogue and interface dialogues using the community scorecards in 8 municipalities. Municipalities is the lowest unit of local governance. So we have conducted this in 8 municipalities, interface dialogue. And this dialogue, community scorecard interface dialogue, have created opportunity for both marginalized communities and duty bearers coming together, discuss issues and challenges, and then see how we can take it forward. And this community scorecard dialogues have been conducted in SDGs 3, health, SDG 4, education, SDG 5, gender equality, SDG 8, youth and decent works, SDG 10, in reduce inequality, SDG 13, climate change, SDG 16, accountability, and SDG 17, partnership and volunteering. And all these data have been updated, uploaded on a open platform and is accessible to all. So this we have done. In addition, what we have also contributed at national level, that we have contributed in Nepal Citizens VNR reports 2017, 2020, 2024 to support National Planning Commission for its official VNR report. So we have contributed in their report. LNOB policy briefs and statements submitted to regional and global policy spaces, emphasizing the roles of youth and volunteering in SDG implementation and accountability. We have also developed a CGD toolkit as part of the inclusive SDG data partnership and integration of the LNOB initiatives within partners program. So all these we have done. So what does it mean to the community then? We have done all these works, VSO and LNOB consortium member. So what does it mean to the communities? So it has empowered the marginalized communities and their raised voices. Youth-led data action gives a voice to underrepresented communities, enabling them to highlight their needs and advocate for better services and policies. I shared about that we have facilitated number of interface dialogue, which has given opportunity to bring citizens and the duty bearers at the one floor. And there is increased accountability as well. What we have observed that there is increased accountability. Through citizen-generated data and community scorecards, public service providers are held accountable. We have seen that they are held accountable. And joint action plans are developed and created a more responsive and transparent governance system. It has promoted youth leadership. They are leading all this, and in induction. It has also promoted collaborative development with civil society, government, private sector. So thank you all for now.
Thanks a lot, Jay. And hearing about all this, I'm wondering whether this elaborate system, which is actually quite impressive, the coalition, the community scorecards, the interfaith dialogues, and all of that, isn't to a certain extent challenging. What we heard from Dr. Ham about one of your main concerns, what quality and reliability of what civil society is able to bring. I mean, I'm sure there's gaps and I'm sure there's deficiencies, but and I know you work together, but there's probably more out there than we sometimes assume. Before we come to Chris and Jessa, just a quick question to Sylvain still. The use of citizen-generated data, other than bringing them into national statistical offices and official processes, do you have anything to share how your communities use this? Are there similar mechanisms to what we've just heard from Jay? How is this benefiting the communities directly?
Thank you so much. So in practice, what we have doing, it's this process of collecting data and also analyzing and disseminating data related to our community is addressing issues such as education, health, and environmental sustainability. This process often includes the use of survey, social media analysts, and participatory mapping, which allow young people with disability to identify local challenge and to propose evidence-based solutions. The importance on the community is proud. It is not only to amplify the voice and the representation of young people with disability in decision-making process, but it also forced a sense of belonging and agency. And this initiative forced a great civic engagement, encouraged a collaboration among diverse community members, and lead informed policy that directly reflect the needs and the aspiration of youth with disability and the community they represent. I was speaking before about the capacity building which we organize on OPDs, on the importance of collecting data on persons with disability. The participants after this capacity building has identified some challenge, and one of the group had preferred to work on the cause of inaccessibility in schools, because it was noted most of schools in Goma and in Democratic Republic of Congo did not collect data on children with disability when enrolling students. This was very difficult for a school to be able to predict and thus support to these children, these students. Also, the group was able to have a discussion with the manager of some schools in order to be able to make them aware on how they can benefit from the Washington group on disability statistic questions.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. That's so encouraging. We have the opportunity now to get a little bit more of a bird's eye view from Christopher Maloney and from Jessa Encarnacion. Both of you come again from very different backgrounds. Chris, you're with the Hewlett Foundation. I know you're very passionate about citizen-generated data. From what you've heard and from what you know, what is needed to make all this fit for purpose? And I'm going to ask the same question to Jessa and continue with a little bit maybe on your particular perspective. Chris.
Great, thanks so much. And good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. Chris Maloney with the Hewlett Foundation in California. I co-lead a portfolio of grant making called Evidence-Informed Policymaking in East and West Africa, which is a terrible mouthful. But what that specifically is about is working with organizations across Africa that are promoting the consistent, reliable use of inclusive data and evidence to inform and improve policymaking across the continent. We've spent over $200 million over the past decade in this space, and we do it for two reasons. One is the practical. We believe that more and better data, more diverse sources of data will lead to better policy outcomes. But equally important is the moral case for improved data and evidence use because of the issue of trust. Trust between citizen and policymaker is broken. Events from Kenya to Senegal show that clearly. In my own country here in the US, we see that very clearly. So doing things where we can empower citizens to engage their policymakers in an evidence-driven, data-driven way is critically important. And that's why as the Hewlett Foundation, we're deeply supportive of the collaborative, of the Copenhagen framework process and citizen-generated data in particular, because of the practical value of it, just in terms of filling important data gaps, but also this moral case of creating a process where more citizens are seen and seen safely and can do so in a way that helps rebuild trust with their policymakers. So coming to this particular question of how can we make data fit for purpose and used, maybe this is my nerdy economist training background, but it really comes down to me, at least, for a question of supply and demand, data supply and data demand. And so what do I mean by that? It means that when we think about citizen-generated data, we need to make sure that the database being produced shows a number of attributes, that it's accessible to all, that it's as inclusive and as safely developed as possible, so that the unseen are seen and seen safely, that it's relevant to policy questions, that it's usable, and that very importantly, that it's proximate. I think the question of proximate data is something we need to grapple with very closely. But happily, these are all principles that we see embedded in one form or another within the Copenhagen framework process. But if we don't have those elements, really we risk a challenge of too much data, data that is either irrelevant or unused, or at worst, actually open to abuse. On the demand side, and for the purposes of this conversation, demand, I'm really thinking about demand for data from a policymaking context. And so what do policymakers need? There's two things. One is capacity building to not be afraid of data. And so we have a lot of investments right now to help build policymaker capacity in data, whether that's actual data science and the boring 101s that are still really, really important, or creating, frankly, what I call safe spaces. So forums, particularly in different topics or parts of Africa, different levels of the data questions, where policymakers can engage with their peers, with advocates and think tanks to really engage on these questions and have that capacity built implicitly. But there's also a role for civil society to not just generate data, but to advocate for policymakers to actually use that data. So that demand is a two-way street. It's not just about policymaker demand, but it's also civil society demanding that policymakers use that data and use it in a responsible way. I'll end by giving two really quick examples. One on the demand side. So we are supporting SDS and Trends on a pretty fascinating project where the Ghana Statistical Services is really pioneering the reporting on SDGs and using citizen-generated data to do that. And so to report on SDG 14.1, which is marine littering, they didn't have a good methodology to how to do that. And so GSS is working together with UNEP, with the Ghana EPA, and with the ICC to develop a methodology that leverages, in many cases, youth-led citizen science groups to create an approach to monitoring marine litter in a way that can then be actually reported to the SDG reporting mechanism for the country. And as far as I can tell, it's one of the first examples of that happening. The second is a much more sensitive and fraught one, and this is important because I do think citizen-generated data offers us a chance to touch on those topics which we may not want to talk about or may have issues with. And one is in Uganda, where right now we are supporting one of the few remaining CSOs in Uganda that is dealing with LGBT issues in that country. And it's a collaboration between that group and Data for Change. And what they are doing is really trying to find ways to generate concrete, methodologically sound data that reflects the experiences of the LGBT community in Uganda in a way that can help respond to very specific policymaking needs right now, whether that's the amicus briefs in the Constitutional Court, the few remaining allies in the security services that are dealing with things like domestic violence, or the Ministry of Health, where they have been very clear that because of the anti-LGBT law in Uganda, that does not mean that there can be a denial of access to health services to LGBT identifying individuals in the country. And so how do you actually generate data on that? So together they're working to create this methodology that leverages a fascinating surveying approach that's largely from the community to the community. So there's a safety issue that's right in there. They have a very inclusive way of doing this that takes account of the multiplicity of identities that might be found in that community. And they're using a whole range of different survey, visual, non-visual storytelling tools to surface what that data can look like. And then most importantly, and I encourage you to see the website if you haven't, reporting it in very easy and creative and interesting ways to understand the experience of what it means to be LGBT right now in Uganda. And then bringing that in appropriate ways to the particular policy challenges or opportunities that they feel they might have to leverage that data. So fascinating example, very fraught, very sensitive, but that data, that evidence is there, and you can choose to ignore it, you can choose to use it, but it's out there, it's something, so now you can't, you need to be able to talk about it, and you can talk about it because we now have those facts. So just wanted to share those two examples, and thanks for having me this morning.
Fabulous, thanks, Chris. And thanks for reminding us that this is a highly political issue. I mean, we're not just about creating trust and getting the right type of information into the right channel. This is challenging. And there's reasons for marginalizations, and these are very often political reasons. And you've mentioned one very prominent one. And of course, there's many others out there. Jessa, you have the opportunity to complement this, but there's been a question, actually, there's been something mentioned that I think someone on screen already asked, what is this framework everyone is talking about, right? The Copenhagen framework. So you have an opportunity to enlighten us over this. This is a process. Obviously, it's something that is exciting. But the question is, what do we need to make citizen data fit for purpose? And the framework is helping us. But please add any perspective that you may have from where you sit. Jessa.
Thank you so much, Wolfgang. And yes, I do have a pleasure of sharing with you the work of the collaborative. Many of you here are part of the collaborative UN Statistics Division, Open Data Watch, the stakeholder groups for persons with disabilities, and of course, World Bank and ICSC. So I think we're well represented here, but first and foremost, what needs to be done to make this fit for purpose, there should be true and meaningful recognition of the value of citizen data. It's easy to say that here in this room because all of us are convinced, but those who are not joining us here virtually or in person, that's something that is still a persistent issue. The value of citizen data and likewise the value of engaging citizens throughout the data value chain. And I think this is what the collaborative on citizen data pushes forward in terms of having more and better data through citizen data, but also equally important, making sure that we are also promoting the values of inclusivity, of fairness, and transparency as we go through the process of producing and using data. So just briefly to introduce the group, the Collaborative on Citizen Data has been established as a decision or as a request made, as a response to the decision and request made by the UN Statistical Commission, which is the highest policymaking body on all statistical matters and led by chief statisticians from governments. It has been established since April of last year. And since then, the immediate ask is really to produce a framework on citizen data, because I think it's coming from an ongoing issue that we cannot measure something or promote something even if we don't have common understanding. We can have citizen generated data, citizen data, community data, citizen data science data. So it's important first and foremost to have a common understanding to push this agenda forward. And therefore we've had at least 3 experts group meeting for the past couple of years. It has been a very busy collaborative, if I may say. And this now gets me to respond to your question on what needs to be done to make it fit for purpose. And these are the tools and mechanisms that the collaborative are actually producing. The framework on citizen data to provide an operational definition and that can promote coherence across all initiatives, but also cognizant of all the perspectives and likewise already existing work. I mean, great work. This is not something that is new, obviously. Decades ago, citizen data has already been there. So there's so much to learn from those experiences. Understanding that it's also beyond just definitions, but also making sure that we are founded by the principles that we should observe in producing and using data. And likewise, it will only happen if there is also an enabling environment that supports the sustainable coordination and production and use of citizen data. So just to share some emerging insights to these tools, the framework in one of our meetings when it was being discussed, it was very clear that the framework should be fit for purpose. It cannot be prescriptive. It cannot be normative. To be candid, it was described, it cannot be UN-ish. So, so the beauty of working with citizen data is we can be adaptive. It's something that we should be able to reflect the lived experiences of the marginalized populations, often left behind in official statistics or in traditional statistics. Second, fit for purpose. The often discussed quality assurance, that quality should be fit for purpose. I think what's emerging insights from the group and likewise from all the consultations that we've had is that quality is often equated with statistical soundness, rightfully so, but it's not a one-dimensional thing. There are also other quality aspects that citizen data also offers, particularly on timeliness, relevance, and responsiveness. And it can also provide data to the furthest left behind. The intersectional data is something that citizen data offers. It also offers the strength of mixed methods, both qualitative and quantitative data. So I think considering this, it may become necessary to consider trade-offs between what is locally useful versus what is nationally or globally comparable. And then my last point in terms of emerging insights would be the building trust and partnership. That it's often that, what can we do for government to be able to trust that the citizen data, but also equally important, what government can do so that citizens and communities can trust how they are also able to use the data. And I think just quickly, following the footsteps of Chris here, just giving you 2 quick use cases, if I may say. I think just one, in terms of the actual citizen data itself, the production itself, Uganda, a pilot country of a country where we are piloting the framework on citizen data. They have produced the CGD toolkit, the toolkit on citizen-generated data. That's both in partnership with the UBOS, the Uganda Bureau of Statistics, as well as the CSO. Now it's being used particularly to produce more data, address data gaps, particularly in SDGs. Now it contributes to their annual SDG reporting. It contributes to their VNRs. And Uganda is one of the first 4 countries who are able to produce SDG reports at the local governments with thanks to supplemental information from citizen data. Now, my second point is not particularly on the data, but rather engagement of citizens with as we produce data. I think a case in point is Albania. When they were doing the violence against women survey from the get-go, from phase one, from stage 0, if I may say, from specifying needs, etc., for the whole gender data value chain. CSOs and NGOs have been involved throughout the process. As a result, quote unquote, new information has now been incorporated in traditional violence against women survey. Meaning, what are this new information? Dating violence, sexual harassment, non-partner violence, etc. So things that are not normally or included in some of these traditional surveys, with thanks to engagements with CSOs, have now included such things. And thus, with this, as a result, the criminal code in Albania now expanded the definition of violence against women, including dating violence, with thanks to that information, and likewise psychological violence. And in terms of services, I mean, with this new information, services have likewise been expanded from the context of civil society in terms of, for the first time, a first rape crisis center has been established in Albania, thus now also producing citizen data for the citizens. Over.
Thanks, Jessa. And a very strong statement, also explaining why UN Women is such a strong protagonist with these kind of examples. Now we have about 10 minutes for a few questions. We have 1 or 2 on online, and we will collect a few. Before we do that, before I forget, I just want to acknowledge our sign language interpreters. I was looking at how they're trying to translate UNish into sign language, but you're doing an amazing job. Maybe a bit of an applause here. All right, let's collect a couple of questions. Please, yes, you may want to mention your name. Short, you can have.
Good morning, and thank you so much for this session. My name is Hend Al-Hanawi. I'm executive director of an organization called Humanitarian Tracker. We do crowdsourcing and AI for social good. We're over 13 years old, and we believe very strongly in citizen-generated data. That's why we were established, to elevate those marginalized voices. When we first started the organization, there was a lot of pushback on using citizen-generated data, although we had shown how it could be beneficial in conflict, in education. Right now, we're crowdsourcing the global goals to see what people are doing to make them a reality. I want to know when you think the switch happened from, no, we don't want to do this, this is bad, to, okay, come on in, join the party a little bit. I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Fabulous. We'll collect a few. Maybe Howie, you can tell us what we heard online, and then we have 1, 2 more. Yes, Howie?
There are 3 questions. The first one is it's to stat, but I think others can respond as well. It's about the quality assurance, what you've been using for citizen data in the office. What do you apply? And the second question is about to our colleague from Nepal National Statistical Office, the NSDS, National Statistical Development, what's the last one? Strategy. NSDS 2, could you kindly share some of the key factors you're considering in developing such a framework within the NSDS 2 for citizen data? And the third one is about how we collect data, asking questions to marginalized communities, while we still use the voice, tone, and frameworks of the dominant groups. This often leads to an imbalance, while the perspective of those being researched are shaped by dominant external viewpoints. So how do we really change that dynamic?
Great. 2 more.
Great, heartening conversation. My name's Jessica from Video Volunteers, and I work in India primarily, where I have kind of the largest citizen-generated data organization, where we have 2,000 people out there gathering stories. And one of the cool things is that they're deciding the agenda of what each of the narratives is. So actually my question is sort of around that. I mean, I think we need to think more about what's motivating people to provide this data, what's in it for them, what's going to inspire them to keep doing it. What we hear a lot is that from the villagers who we are engaging and inspiring to participate in this is, but why are we being asked to answer the questions or gather the data? What will it take for us to be the ones setting the agenda, deciding the questions that are going to be asked? So I guess my question would be for our friends from Nepal and Italy about that. Is that even possible? What would you say to a villager who is saying, hey, I want to not just gather the data, but also tell you guys what we should be gathering?
Maybe you pass on to the next.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Brenda Namata, and I work with Policy. It's a feminist civic tech organization headquartered in Uganda, but our work spans around Africa. So recently we developed a scorecard that we call the Afrofeminist Internet Scorecard, where we are using it to do the identification of digital challenges faced by women within Africa, but then also using it to assess progress of governments in responding to these challenges that have been identified. It's a research tool, but at the same time, we are also using it as an advocacy tool to build communities, multi-stakeholder communities of practice within the respective countries. And those are 7 countries currently that we are working in with a scorecard, among which is Goma from Democratic Republic of Congo. And the question here is, it is of course generating citizen data to be able to use it to engage with policymakers, but then also generate localized solutions towards addressing, but also demanding for accountability and response from governments on the identified digital divide challenges. But one of the challenges within that is the pushback from governments to accept citizen data as authentic and credible for action, as opposed to the formal processes. And the question here is, how do we then get to have governments, especially in developing countries, to get on a table of acceptance and collaborative working with communities, but then also civil society organizations to create the change or bridge the digital divide, and especially making the voices count of the very marginalized. And then back to us in the room as development actors, how do we then strengthen but also amplify and widen the process of enhanced citizen data and also community-based solutions towards the identified gaps in society? Thank you.
But it has to be the last one. Time is running out, and I want the panel to have the opportunity to pick and choose some of the questions that you've heard. I'm trying to summarize them quickly, but some were addressed directly. So please, last one from here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Solace. I work for Grantmakers for Girls of Color. We are a philanthropic intermediary, specifically thinking about youth of color and how we empower them and give them more funds. I have 3 particular questions, but they're particular to people. Okay, that's fine. My most important question, I believe, is about the question of trust. How are you all ceding power to young people so that they are empowered to work with your organizations? Most particularly, I would prefer if you speak about young trans individuals and their communities, because data is usually extractive when it comes to queer and trans communities rather than like empowering so they work with you. And I would love if you particularly talking about your methodologies for empowering and ceding power to young people.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for prioritizing, and thanks for the understanding. I'd say we go through the panel and everyone gets to speak, maybe on the topic that you feel either most passionate or more competent about. There were questions around what's in it for the community. There were questions about the quality and reliability of data. There was something about NSTS, the situation of trans people, questions of the gap between what is being perceived by governments in terms of quality and reliability of data. So why don't we start with you, Monica, and we just go through the panel. And yeah, we gotta make it short.
Sweet and short, I would say. Sweet because quality is not a general dogmatic concept. When we talk about data quality, we should say quality of those data collected in that way. Otherwise, we are talking about nothing. So there is not a general quality. There is the quality of the data produced with that data value chain on that phenomenon. Just to make an example, and then I pass the micro, using operators, women generally, operating in the anti-violence center as interviewers. So as interviewers mean having a computer-assisted telephone interviewing system or a face-to-face interview in one of each of these two possibilities, then they act as interviewers, but we evaluate in any case the interviewer effect on the collected data. So there is a scientific way of assessing quality of collected data using surveys, and we must apply this. No chance. And what we have are good quality data or not. So please.
Thank you. I assume one or two questions are related to me. The first one was on online regarding the NSDS, National Strategy for the Development of the Statistics. We all are aware that these are the strategies, a type of the plan, which includes policy with some prescribed time frame. The NSDS has opened the door for this citizen-generated data. That was what I was explaining during my presentation. It has not yet been implemented, but it has opened the door that in the future, where there is a data gap, there we can collaborate with the citizens, with the CSOs and many other agencies, so that the data can be, the gap can be fulfilled. Regarding the quality assurance, my colleague from Italy has already highlighted that once we can do it as a collaborative approach, then automatically the data quality will be high. The other question I think relevant maybe from Jessica, who worked in India, which is my neighbor country. And then, yes, the stakeholder engagement is the very big issue in the data production. Traditionally, we are doing that data user producer dialogues. Even sometimes we do data user survey, the data user satisfaction survey. Are you satisfied with the data? What are available? Are you satisfied with the quality of the data that we produce periodically? And then same type of the user producer dialogue can be maintained with the citizens as well during the phase of the data production as well as during the phase of the data use. If data are available, then they should have to be used for some specific purpose, because every data has some specific objectives, because it will be worthless to produce the data either by the official source or by the citizen generated data. That's why stakeholder engagement should have to be strengthened, in my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. There is one question about that on quality assurance of the data. Let me share some civil society perspective, how we are doing quality assurance. So there are two ways. One is that methodological soundness. The concept, definitions, scopes are well aligned with national EMNI framework that give us some quality assurance that we are not doing differently. Yes, so that is one. Second thing is that the basis of a score and recording of the data, we use the tools that is recognized by government. For example, CSE, a community scorecard, tools is well recognized by good governance, promotion strategy and action plan 2017. So these two tools gives us some assurance that quality data are standard. Thank you.
I'll try and briefly address the melange of questions on how to collect data in marginalized communities, these questions of trust and power. I'll be very blunt. I am a 6'5" white guy sitting at a tech-funded foundation in a redwood forest in California. I could not be farther removed from the issues that I'm trying to work on, and I fully recognize that. So my job is to go out there and try and find, without designing ex ante any things I may think are the quote unquote right things to do in California, solutions that are coming from the organizations that we're trying to support. So for example, in the case of this Ugandan CSO that we're working with, which is entirely youth-led and LGBT-led, including trans, there was a process led by GPSTD 3 years ago called the Inclusive Data Charter, and parallel with the data values work that was done. And they use that, these leverage, I think about 700 or 800 different organizations from across the global south that work in the data space to help inform what those documents will look like. And then from that basically launched a challenge to find interesting projects that could help bring those into reality. That's what surfaced this organization in Uganda. That project that I described was entirely developed and articulated by them. And they worked closely with Data for Change, which is a leading LGBT-led organization in Sweden that brought a whole suite of tools to develop a survey methodology that involved everything from leveraging artwork to get people to talk about their experiences. As I said before, quite an interesting methodology in how to talk about identity. So it's not just man, woman, that type of thing. And then to create a way to visualize that data in a way that was safe and completely defined by that community. I didn't come up with any of that, right? But I was able to empower processes that were able to surface those things. And so thinking through how you do things ex ante is really the key. That's just my example. There are hundreds of others, but I just thought I would share that just to sort of give one way that you can do this.
Yes, I'm not sure if there was any question to me, but I would address the last question because my experience whenever I'm walking into a room and call myself a youth delegate is that people tend to say that, oh, I'm a dinosaur to you, or like trying to make them very old compared to me and distancing a lot to me. And it makes me kind of sad because what I really want them is to see me as an equal. So at least what I try to tell them and try to urge other people to do and to all in the room is seeing me as an equal partner and try to show that I have knowledge about different topics just like they do. Yeah.
I don't think if I have a special thing to say, but continuing the idea from my colleague, the only thing which I may say in the same sense, it's when it's relative to disability, it's to consider that I know you know the situation, but this is better again if myself who is living the situation to speak about what is my experience, because there may be experience, but as living experience is also more, and it can add a value in the work. That means equality, it's also involving from the statement to start every process and to take, to be sure to have our own in that process. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Just to respond to the question on how we collect the data, I think it's also, again, changing the perspective and mindset that it's not just about the statistical output that we produce, but rather it should be a user-centric approach. What data is needed by our citizens so that they're also involved in the process. We've had that experience coming from, I think, similar to what Monica has mentioned in the experience of Italy, being CSO listeners, being part of a violence against women survey, for example, that we've had in Morocco. And then they became an advocate, they became a key influencer, a key messenger to make sure that that we are able to influence the policy as well as law in the country. So I think it's making sure that they are part and parcel of the process from stage 0 up to the uptake and use. And lastly, why only now? What made the switch happen? I was thinking that I think it was somehow alluded to by the presentation of Nepal that, in times of crisis during COVID, that happened. When we were seeing SDG data, I think the collaborative was created as part of the IAG SDGs recommendation. When we still see after 8 years that we still don't have that we are still lacking roughly 50% of the data needed to monitor the SDGs, then that's now we are looking for other sources of data. And I think that's a big lesson learned from our end, from every one of us, that looking at citizen data cannot be an afterthought, that there should be intentionality and true recognition of what citizen data offers to the broader data ecosystem. And I think that's one thing that we cannot afford to miss the opportunity to leverage on such an opportunity.
Wonderful. We're in extra time. We acknowledge that the sign interpreters are already doing overtime for us. Really appreciate that. I'm going to refrain from what the organizers expected from me, doing some final reflections. The only thing I want to share is my excitement about being able to have such a wonderful, diverse, and not controversial, but really passionate panel with these kind of different perspectives that are all behind a common ambition, which is empowering communities, empowering people through data, but also empowering those who usually don't have a voice and are not being heard and are not being brought into policy-making spaces. We're making immense progress. I don't think a panel like that would have existed 5 years ago. So I think it's wonderful. And of course, all of you also being part of that growing community. So maybe a final round of thank you for the wonderful panelists and for all of us. And that was the end. Thank you.